Understanding the importance of the Amazonas River and the discoveries throughout the journey. Viaje a la América Meridional por el río Amazonas, estudio sobre la Quina de la Condamine en el Ecuador, por María Julia Dávalos. To be able to understand the importance of the text presented by La Fuente and Estrella in 1993, we must be able to take in consideration two names. First of all, La Condamine. His presence and knowledge was really important to understand why the Amazonas River was so important to this continent, for communication, for traveling, for survival to the species and the people, and also because it gave a lot of importance throughout the journey when they discovered the use of the quina and the cascarilla tree. During 1730, there was a scientific debate between the academic media around Europe. The followers of Newton and the Cartesians about trying to define whether the Earth was flattened on the poles or if it was flattened in the equatorial line. Because of this conflict, two expeditions were programmed. One that was supposed to end up in Laponia and the other one who had to end in Quito. In 1735, the geodesic mission was composed by Charles Marie Condamine, Godin, Bouguer, and Rousseau. Spain also sent Jorge Juan and Antonio de Ulloa. In 1736, they arrived to Quito. The objective of this exploration was, as quoted from the text, determination in the value of a degree of terrestrial meridian in the proximities of the equinoctial line. As you can see, they only wanted to understand why it was so important to measure how the meridian degrees affected the land around the equinoctial line. At the same time, they stand out with geographical, anthropological, and botanical studies. La Condamine was able to deliver the knowledge he had about the Amazonas River and the quina tree. La Condamine decides to take the Amazonas route to go back to Europe. He was able to improve the map of the Meridional America. He wanted to make a more specific and detailed map, showing not only the importance and the longitude of this river, but to show the different aspects of this natural resource and how it affected the different populations and nature around the system. In 1737, La Condamine writes a text of a journey where he goes to Loja. He also expresses the investigations made in Santa Fe de Bogotá about the quinas. He, by then, already knew the importance of this tree. He had already acknowledged the fact that it was used in a medicinal way to cure different diseases or symptoms that people could have. In 1745, the version of the map of the Amazonas River and the meridional area of America was presented at the Paris Academy. Here in the picture, you can see the Paris Academy, where people had to present their achievements through the explorations, and by this they were recognized with honors. The myth and geometry in the Amazonas. La Condamine had more than one purpose on taking the Amazonas route to go back to Europe. Quoted, he was looking to understand the river in all of its dimensions, its depth, longitude, speed, flow and volume, the variation of the compass needle, where the river joins the sea, and the communication with other areas in the Meridional America. The river, of course, was the center of his investigation. But the important thing about the writings and the text that Condamine presented was that it was a completely scientific text. People in this time were trying to write things that blew people's minds away. They wanted to surprise everybody with this unknown world. Instead, this text was different from the rest because it was specifically dedicated to the scientific part. The rest of the texts at the time were about heroism or fantastic adventures of this unknown world. This is why this text was not for any reader. He intended to be read by scientific people. It was going to be very difficult for La Condamine to get a place and followers with this new text, especially between the missioners, adventurers, conquerors, and dreamers. They were the most interested in what was happening in America. And with this text, yes, of course, it was very important, but it did not cause interest in any person. Because of the poor description he had of the life around the Amazonas River, he was criticized and considered an unfair description to this territory. Of course, this perspective also, as mentioned before, it was only because he was not interested in this savage and different lifestyle that the natives had in America. Although the La Condamine did not took time describing the aborigines of the Amazonas, he was able to establish contact with the Omaguas, who was considered at the time the most civilized culture. They taught him several things about botanics, and also he learned how to cause a cranial deformation by putting a splint in the head, and other things. Here you can see some in the picture of the left, some ceramics made by the Omaguas, who you can see already had some cultural meaning. And on the other hand, you can see the other picture of this man with this deformation, which in the Omagua civilizations usually meant different status or different positions in the hierarchy of their cultures. La Condamine referred to the natives as a group of people who were dirty, poor, and ignorant, aggressive, and other things. This is why he was also criticized. He never had the chance to study these populations. He just went around and saw how they behave in their environment and did not study the context that was surrounding them. Cultures such as the Yameos have been able to develop tools used for hunting, such as the cerbatanas, which is a weapon that people use to shoot poisonous spines to the prey by blowing strongly through a stick. This you can see on the first picture on the top. Here's the native blowing the cerbatana against a bird, I believe. They also built canoes, but La Condamine also criticized their poor language. It is known that they did not need a complex language to communicate between each other, but they had gestures and different ways of expressing with their bodies to survive around the jungle. Bouguer, who was also involved in the expedition, was also returning to Europe to present the report of all the knowledge achieved during the journey. Remember, he was part of the geodesic mission. He decided to take another route, not the long one that La Condamine, but because he was also he also had similar objectives, La Condamine was afraid that he would get first and presented a similar work, and that he was going to lose the honors and academic recognition after everything he had accomplished by now. La Condamine shows interest in some plants and seeds that had utility, such as the cacao, rubber, ipecacuana, simurava, salpaparilla, etc. You can see the cacao, the rubber, the ipecacuana, and the simurava on the top in the pictures, and on the bottom you can see animals such as the puma and the bear, who were animals that it was surprising for him to see in a normal day. That is why he mentioned in the text. From the three available routes to go back, La Condamine chooses the longest and most dangerous one. This route allowed him to visit a mineral exploitation at Zaruma. After several accidents, he was enlisted in the navigation from Jan de Bracamoras. At Borja, Jean Magnin was waiting for him who gave him writings and maps about the area. He was also helping with the exploration. Magnin went with him until the Laguna, where Pedro Vicente Maldonado was waiting for him. He was also part of the geodesic mission. This was the step before finalizing the exploration. He met with the territorial conflict between Pevas and Quani that Spain and Portugal were going through. He criticized the situation by saying, "This looks like a fight between two missioners and not between two crowns." They believed that crowns would have to be more civilized by now and define these things with other processes. The legend and reality about the quina. Here are some pictures about this plant. They are different. On the bottom you can see la quina roja, the red quina, and the other is the normal quina. In 1737, the financial status of the French company hit the ground. They could not pay the criollos. The criollos were the people that were sons of Spanish but that were born on the American continent. La Condamine exchanged some letters of credit with a value of 12,000 pounds. This trip was the opportunity to get in touch with the famous Quina or Cascarilla. With this purpose, he was able to justify the presence of the botanist Jussieu as a member of the exploration. They needed to make a description of the geography of this area because there was a theory about that only at this altitude in Loja, where he wanted to do it, it was going to be able to reproduce the quina tree. The academic level of La Condamine opened the opportunity to classify this species, and in 1742 it was known as the chinchona. I would later explain why the name La Chinchona. There were some confusions about the different types of La Quina. La Condamine recognized these errors by saying that he needed more time. He had not established that there were different colors and species and sizes of La Quina, but he knew that the medicinal effects were similar between each other. In 1739, Jussieu, Seniergues, and Morinville moved to Loja to define the studies, but not until 1936 these were revealed and considered valuable. There were some important characters that continued with the specialized studies of the Cascarilla: López Ruiz, Mutis, Pavón, Caldas, Tafalla, and Humboldt, who is a very recognized character in exploration. La Condamine emphasizes that the quina was used by the natives a lot before the colonization. They used this medicinal plant when fever was presented. There is a story that says that the vicereine Condess of Chinchon was healed with this plant. This is where its name comes from. After this, it was known as the polvos de la condesa. Its efficacy was shown to the Jesuits, who accumulated and distributed the quina, and later on it was known as the polvos de los jesuitas. Its use became legendary, but to be produced they needed to know when, where, and how it grew. Because the cultures here in America were not taking value about this plant, they treated and used it as any other plant, but did not knew that they needed to keep it producing and planting it so that it will survive for longer times. These facts showed the importance of the journey of La Condamine. He believed that American culture did not understand the value of La Quina and the effect it had around medicine. La Quina, when they started studying the plant in Europe, when they brought it back, they realized that it could cause several healing effects. For example, it caused similar effects like paludismo and other diseases. It also cured ulcers and hernias and different pains. The natives had a specific name for La Quina. It was called Yaracara Yara Churchu. Yara means tree, Churchu means called for the fever, and Cara means cortex, which you can see it's tree cortex and tree called for the fever. The part that was used for curing the fever came from the cortex of the plant. In conclusion, although their journey was about making a map and defining the clear description about the Amazon River, the emphasis and knowledge about the quina gave more value to this territory. In the end, there is no journey with one purpose and no journey with only one result.